The key no longer fit. That was the first sign. For Clara Ellis, her life in the sun-drenched hills of Bel Air was perfect. A sprawling mansion, a handsome husband, Marcus Thorne, and a baby on the way. She thought she had it all. But on a Tuesday afternoon, standing in front of her own front door, with a useless piece of brass in her hand, she discovered her perfect life was a meticulously crafted lie. The house wasn't just locked, it was sold. And the man she loved, the father of her unborn child, was the one who had sold it right out from under her, leaving her pregnant, homeless, and with nothing but the designer clothes on her back. This isn't a fairy tale. This was the story of how one woman's world was shattered by the ultimate betrayal, and how her rescue came from the most unexpected and powerful man in the city. The Californian sun had a way of making everything look like a postcard. It gilded the marble entryway of the Thorne residence, made the azure water of the infinity pool sparkle, and cast long, dramatic shadows from the cypress trees lining the driveway. For Clara Ellis, this postcard had been her reality for the past 5 years. She'd married Marcus Thorne, the charismatic heir to the Thorne Legacy Corp. A man whose smile was as polished as his Italian leather shoes. Their life was a whirlwind of charity galas, weekend trips to Napa, and quiet evenings where the biggest decision was which Michelin-starred restaurant to order from. Clara, a talented art historian, had put her career on hold, believing she was building something more profound, a family. And now, at 29, she was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a son. The nursery was almost complete. It was a masterpiece of muted earth tones, with a custom-built crib and a hand-painted mural of a gentle forest scene. Clara spent hours in there, folding tiny clothes, her hand resting protectively on her growing belly. But lately, a subtle chill had begun to seep into her perfect world, a draft coming from a crack she couldn't quite locate. Marcus was distant. He'd always been ambitious, but this was different. He'd come home late, smelling of expensive whiskey, and a faint, unfamiliar perfume. Something sharp and floral, nothing like her own subtle vanilla scent. He'd brush it off as client dinners and late-night strategy sessions. His phone, once left carelessly on the nightstand, was now perpetually in his pocket, screen down. Just a big deal at work, Ames, he'd said, last night, his eyes not quite meeting hers. It's taking everything I've got, but it'll all be worth it. For us. For the baby. She had wanted to believe him, desperately. She blamed her unease on pregnancy hormones, the nesting instinct making her overly sensitive. That Tuesday, she'd gone for her routine obstetrician appointment. The doctor, a warm woman named Dr. Lena Hansen, had shown her the baby's strong heartbeat on the ultrasound monitor. Thump, thump, thump. The sound was a powerful anchor in the swirling sea of her anxieties. Filled with renewed hope, she'd stopped at a boutique on Rodeo Drive and bought a tiny pair of sneakers, a ridiculously extravagant purchase that made her smile. She pulled her white Range Rover into the familiar driveway at 3 in the afternoon, humming along to the radio. And that's when she saw it. Stuck into the manicured lawn, just to the right of the prize-winning rose bushes, was a sign. A real estate sign. It was bold red, and had one word that made the air rush from her lungs: sold. For a moment she thought it was a prank, a tasteless, elaborate joke by one of Marcus's wealthy friends. She parked the car, her heart beginning a frantic rhythm that had nothing to do with her baby's steady beat. She walked to the sign, touching the cold, impersonal plastic. Sold by Sterling Properties. She didn't recognize the name. A wave of nausea sharper than any morning sickness she'd experienced washed over her. She fumbled in her Hermes purse for her keys, her hands shaking. She walked up the stone steps to the heavy oak door she had walked through 1,000 times. She slid the key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. She tried again. Nothing. It was as if the lock had been changed. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her denial. She pressed the doorbell, the familiar chimes echoing strangely from within the silent house. No one answered. She knocked her fist, thudding against the solid wood. Marcus. Is anyone home? Her voice was thin, fragile. She pulled out her phone to call him, but a black Rolls-Royce Ghost purred up the driveway and came to a stop behind her Range Rover. The driver's side door opened and Marcus got out. He was dressed in a tailored Tom Ford suit, looking every bit the powerful executive. But his face was a cold, unreadable mask. The passenger door opened and a woman emerged. She was tall and stunningly beautiful with raven hair and a predatory grace. She wore a tight crimson dress that screamed money and ambition. Clara recognized her from a society event months ago. Isabella Vance, a notoriously aggressive real estate developer. Isabella leaned against the car, a smug, triumphant smirk on her face as she looked at Clara, then at the house. Marcus. What is going on? Clara's voice trembled. Why can't I get in now? What is that sign? Marcus walked towards her, his footsteps echoing in the terrifying silence. He didn't look at her belly. He didn't look at her face. He looked at a point just over her shoulder. The house is sold, Clara, he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. It was the voice of a stranger. Sold. She repeated the word, tasting like ash. What do you mean, sold? This is our home. The baby's nursery is... My house is sold, he corrected her, his tone sharp. It was always my house, a pre-marital asset. My lawyers made sure of that. The prenup, a document she had signed without much thought, blinded by love and trust. Her own father had warned her, but she had dismissed his concerns as old-fashioned. But why a tear finally broke free and traced a hot path down her cheek. We're having a baby, Marcus. He finally met her gaze, and what she saw there horrified her. There was no love, no remorse, only icy contempt. Plans change. Isabella and I are together now. We're moving forward. Isabella pushed off the car and glided towards them, her arm linking possessively with Marcus's. She looked Clara up and down, her gaze lingering on the swell of her stomach with a flicker of distaste. Don't look so shocked, darling. Isabella purred, her voice like velvet laced with poison. You didn't really think a man like Marcus would be tied down forever, did you? Some of us offer more than just a domestic purpose. The insult hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Clara felt like she'd been slapped. My things, our wedding photos, the baby's room. She stammered, her mind racing. Your personal effects are in storage, Marcus said, dismissively pulling a card from his wallet. The details are here. My assistant will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. We'll be generous, of course. A settlement. He tried to hand her the card, but her hands were numb. She couldn't take it. Generous. She whispered, the full weight of the betrayal crashing down on her. You sold our home. You're leaving me while I'm carrying your son. You're throwing us away. Don't be so dramatic, Clara. He snapped, his composure finally cracking. You're not the first woman to get a divorce. I've deposited $50,000 into your account. That should be more than enough for you to find a new place and get settled before before. He couldn't even say the word baby. Get off the property, Clara, he said, his voice turning hard. The new owners are arriving shortly. It's no longer your concern. He turned, and with Isabella clinging to his arm, they walked back to the Rolls-Royce. They didn't look back. They didn't look back as Clara stood pregnant and alone in the driveway of the life that had just been stolen from her. The black car reversed, smoothly navigated the turn, and disappeared down the sun-drenched street, leaving only the scent of exhaust and shattered dreams. Clara stood there for an eternity, the $50,000 settlement, feeling like 30 pieces of silver. The sky so bright and cheerful, moments before, now seemed to mock her. Then the California sun betrayed her, and the sky opened up. A sudden, unseasonable downpour began soaking her hair, her dress, her soul, as she finally crumpled to the ground. The sound of her own heartbroken sobs, lost in the rhythm of the falling rain. The rain was relentless, plastering her thin silk blouse to her skin, the chill seeping deep into her bones. Clara didn't know how long she sat there on the wet asphalt of the driveway, her body shaking with a grief so profound it felt like a physical tearing. The $50,000 Marcus mentioned was a cruel joke. In a city where a shoebox apartment cost a fortune, it was a pittance, a dismissal. It was the price he had put on her, on their son. Her Range Rover, once a symbol of her comfortable life, now felt like a car. Where could she go? Her parents were gone, lost in a car accident 3 years prior. Her only living relative was a cousin in Oregon she hadn't spoken to in years. She had friends, yes, but they were their friends. Couples. They socialized with people enmeshed in Marcus's world of wealth and influence. To go to them would be to invite petty gossip and ultimately judgment. Except for one. Chloe. Chloe Jensen was her one true friend, a sharp-witted journalist she'd known since before Marcus was even in the picture. Chloe had never fully trusted him, always seeing a sliver of the narcissist beneath the charm. Clara pulled out her phone, her fingers clumsy and slick with rain. She found Chloe's number and pressed call. Ames. You okay? You sound awful. Chloe's voice was a lifeline. He kicked me out. Chloe. Clara sobbed the words tumbling out in a broken mess. He sold the house. He's with someone else. Isabella Vance. I have nowhere to go. There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a string of curses directed at Marcus that was both shocking and deeply comforting. Where are you right now? In the driveway. Stay in your car. Lock the doors. Text me the address. I'm coming. We'll figure this out. An hour later, Chloe's beat-up Honda Civic pulled up. Chloe, with her fiery red hair and fiercely loyal eyes, got out and ran to Clara's window, tapping on the glass. When Clara unlocked the door, Chloe pulled her into a fierce hug, ignoring the rain and the soaked designer clothes. We'll destroy him, Chloe said, her voice a low growl. Legally. Publicly. I don't care. But first, let's get you out of here. Chloe's apartment in Koreatown was a world away from Bel Air. It was small, vibrant, and cluttered with books and half-finished articles. It smelled of coffee and home. For the next 2 weeks, it was Clara's sanctuary. Chloe was a fierce guardian, fielding calls from Marcus's smarmy assistant and shielding Clara from the world. But the reality of her situation was a constant, crushing weight. The The $50,000 wouldn't last. She needed a lawyer, an apartment, furniture, baby supplies. She was 6 months pregnant, visibly, so making the prospect of finding a job in her specialized field of art history next to impossible. Every night she'd lie awake on Chloe's sofa bed, her hands on her belly, whispering apologies to her unborn son for the chaotic world he was about to enter. Her name, once associated with high society, was now being dragged through the mud. Whispers started expertly leaked by Marcus's PR team. Clara was unstable. Her pregnancy had made her erratic and demanding. Marcus had been a long-suffering husband who had finally broken free. The narrative was twisting, painting him as the victim. The injustice of it was a bitter pill. One rainy Thursday, desperate for a change of scenery and a sense of normalcy, Clara decided to visit a small independent bookstore a few blocks from Chloe's apartment. She needed to be surrounded by stories by worlds other than her own miserable one. Clutching a worn copy of a book on Renaissance art, she was walking back to the apartment, huddled under a small umbrella that did little to stop the driving rain. Her mind was a million miles away, calculating expenses, imagining courtrooms, picturing Marcus and Isabella in her house. Distracted, she stepped off the curb at the same time a cyclist, head down against the weather, swerved to avoid a puddle. He crashed right into her. The impact sent her stumbling backwards. Her purse flew open, its contents scattering across the wet pavement. The book landed in a puddle. The tiny sneakers she'd bought for the baby, which she carried with her like a talisman, tumbled into the gutter. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry," the cyclist said, untangling himself from his bike. Clara was more stunned than hurt, but the sight of the tiny, soaked shoes was the final straw. All the pent-up fear, anger, and hopelessness surged to the surface. She sank to her knees on the sidewalk, uncaring of the grime and the rain, and began to sob, her shoulders heaving. She was vaguely aware of footsteps approaching. Heavy, expensive footsteps. "Are you all right, miss?" a deep voice asked. It was calm, controlled, and cut through the noise of the city. Clara looked up, wiping rain and tears from her eyes. A man stood over her, holding a large black umbrella that shielded them both from the downpour. He was impossibly tall, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that probably cost more than Chloe's car. His face was sharp and angular, with intense, dark eyes that seemed to see right through her. There was an aura of immense power and stillness about him. He looked like he owned the world and was currently unimpressed by it. A black limousine was idling by the curb, a chauffeur standing at attention. I'm fine," she lied, trying to gather her scattered belongings. Her hands were shaking too hard. The man knelt, his expensive trousers getting wet on the pavement, without a flicker of concern. He began picking up her things, her wallet, her keys, the lipstick that had rolled under a car. Then his hand hovered over the tiny mud-splattered sneaker in the gutter. He picked it up gently, his long fingers cradling it as if it were a fragile bird. He looked from the shoe to her swollen belly, and his expression, previously aloof and unreadable, shifted. It was a subtle change, a flicker of something she couldn't name. Recognition. Pity. "Let me help you," he said, his voice softer this time. It was a statement, not a question. He helped her to her feet, his grip on her elbow firm and steadying. "Where are you going?" Just an apartment." Around the corner, she mumbled, embarrassed by her state, by the fact that this powerful stranger was witnessing her at her absolute lowest point. "You're soaked through. You'll catch a cold," Let my driver take you." "No, I couldn't possibly." "I insist." He guided her towards the waiting limousine. The chauffeur opened the door, revealing an interior of plush cream leather that smelled of wealth and quiet success. It was a world she had once known, but now felt alien to her. She hesitated at the door. "I don't even know your name." He looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face. "My name is Kai Carter." The name hit her like a physical blow. Kai Carter. He wasn't just a millionaire CEO. He was the millionaire CEO. The enigmatic, media-shy founder of Carter Enterprises, a global tech and investment firm that was a direct and fierce competitor to Thorn Legacy Corp. Marcus spoke of him with a mixture of fear and derision, calling him a ruthless shark. He was a legend in the business world, a man who had built an empire from nothing. "You're Kai Carter," she breathed. He confirmed, his expression unreadable. He looked at her again, a long, searching look. "And you are Clara Ellis, Marcus Thorne's wife." Her blood ran cold. Of course, he knew who she was. This wasn't a random act of kindness. This was something else. Was he gloating? Did he want to see his rival's cast-off wife in her moment of humiliation? Ex-wife. "Soon," she corrected him, her voice regaining a sliver of its former strength. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Carter, but I can manage." She turned to leave, but his next words stopped her dead. "Your father was David Ellis, the art curator," he said. It wasn't a question. She spun around, stunned. "How did you know that he was a good man?" "He gave me my first break, an internship at the museum when I was a student with nothing to my name. He believed in me when no one else did." He paused, his gaze softening with a memory. "I was very sorry to hear of his passing. I owe him a debt I can never repay." Clara was speechless. Her father had helped countless students, but she had never heard this story. "The debt is his, but the respect is mine to give to his daughter." Kai continued, his voice low and sincere. "Please, allow me to help you, not as a rival to Marcus Thorne, but as someone who respects the memory of David Ellis. Let me get you home, and let me give you the name of my personal lawyer. She is the best in the city. She will ensure you are not taken advantage of." Clara looked at this formidable man, the supposed shark of the corporate world. In his eyes, she didn't see a predator. She saw an unexpected and incredibly powerful ally. She thought of Chloe's small apartment, her dwindling bank account, the smug look on Isabella's face, and the tiny, ruined sneaker Kai was still holding. She had nothing left to lose. With a deep breath that was half surrender and half hope, she nodded. "Okay, Mr. Carter, I accept your help." As she slid into the warm, silent sanctuary of the limousine, she had no idea that this chance encounter on a rain-slicked street was not the end of her drama, but the beginning of a battle that would shake the foundations of two of the city's most powerful families. The limousine glided through the city traffic with an imperious silence. Clara sat on the plush leather cashmere blanket draped over her shoulders by the silent chauffeur. Kai Carter sat opposite her, not speaking, simply observing the city lights blur past the tinted windows. The silence wasn't awkward. It was charged, a space filled with unspoken questions. They didn't drive to Chloe's cramped apartment in Koreatown. Instead, the limousine pulled into the subterranean garage of one of the newest, most exclusive high-rises in Century City, the Carter Tower. It was Kai's flagship building, a sleek monolith of glass and steel that scraped the sky. Carter. "This isn't where I live," Clara said, a new wave of uncertainty washing over her. "I know," he replied, turning to her as the car came to a stop. "You cannot fight a war from a refugee camp. You need a fortress, and until you have your own, you will use one of mine." Before she could protest, he was leading her through a private elevator that opened directly into a sprawling penthouse. The space was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 270-degree view of Los Angeles, the city lights a glittering carpet below. The furniture was minimalist and modern, a curated collection of art, a genuine Rothko on one wall, a Giacometti sculpture in a corner speaking to a sophisticated and discerning taste. It was luxurious, but unlike her former home with Marcus, it wasn't ostentatious. It was a place of quiet, confident power. "This is too much," she whispered, overwhelmed. "It is a temporary base of operations," Kai stated, walking towards the kitchen, which was a marvel of stainless steel and Italian marble. "There is a fully stocked kitchen, a concierge service downstairs for anything you need, and the security is absolute. No one gets up here without my express permission. You will be safe here. You and your son." He said it with such finality, such calm authority, that arguing seemed futile. He was offering her a gilded shield and a sword, and she knew she would be a fool to refuse. The next morning, as promised, Kai's lawyer arrived. She was nothing like the folksy, avuncular lawyers Clara had imagined. Evelyn Reed was a woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes, a severe haircut, and a suit that looked like it was woven from steel. She carried a slim leather briefcase and exuded an aura of lethal competence. They sat at a large glass dining table overlooking the city. Clara, feeling small and underdressed in the simple maternity dress Chloe had helped her buy, recounted the entire story. The prenup she'd barely read, Marcus's sudden change in behavior, the affair with Isabella Vance, the sale of the house, the public humiliation. Evelyn Reed listened without interruption, her fingers steepled. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered something far more valuable: strategy. The prenuptial agreement is ironclad regarding premarital assets, like the house itself. Evelyn began, her voice crisp. Marcus's father's lawyers were very good. However, they made a critical error. They were arrogant. An error, Clara asked, leaning forward. They focused on protecting the initial asset, but they were sloppy regarding the appreciation of that asset during the marriage, and more importantly, the commingling of funds, Evelyn explained. You, Clara, contributed to the value of that home, not just through financial means, but through your role as his wife, hosting events, managing the property, and creating a home that enhanced his social and business standing. This is a recognized contribution. We can argue for a significant portion of the home's increased value. A sliver of hope ignited in Clara's chest. But that is the small game, Evelyn continued, a predatory glint in her eye. The real issue here is fraud. Fraud. He sold a marital home, or what can be argued as a marital home in spirit and function, without your consent. He claims you signed the papers. Did you know? Never. I would never have agreed to sell that house, not with the baby coming. Excellent, Evelyn said with a thin smile. He forged your signature. That is a felony. He also liquidated shared investment portfolios to fund his new life with Miss Vance, hiding the assets in offshore accounts. We've already begun tracking the transfers. Marcus thinks he's clever. He isn't. He's just a common cheat who happens to have a rich father. For the first time in weeks, Clara felt a surge of power. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a plaintiff. Over the next few days, the penthouse became a command center. Evelyn and her team of forensic accountants and investigators worked with terrifying efficiency. They subpoenaed bank records, real estate documents, and communication logs. Kai remained a distant but constant presence. He never intruded, but every evening he would call or send a brief text. "Are you comfortable? Do you need anything?" He arranged for a top prenatal nutritionist and a yoga instructor to visit her at the penthouse, ensuring her health and the babies were the top priority. One evening he joined her on the balcony. The air was cool and the city below was alive with light. "Why are you doing all of this?" Clara asked, her voice soft. "I know the story about my father and I'm grateful. But this is more than paying back a debt for an internship." Kai was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant Thorn Legacy Corp, building its logo, a proud, arrogant beacon in the skyline. "Your father gave me a chance," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But what you may not know is that my family also has a history with the Thorns. A long one." He turned to face her, his expression grim. "My father was a brilliant engineer. He co-founded a small tech firm with Marcus's father, Harrison Thorn, 30 years ago. They were partners, friends. My father developed a revolutionary patent that was set to make them both billionaires. But Harrison Thorn was a patient snake. He manipulated the contracts, pushed my father out, and stole the patent. He took everything. My father was ruined professionally and emotionally. He died a few years later of a heart attack, a broken man." Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She had never heard this story. The Thorns had always painted themselves as self-made titans. "I was a teenager when it happened." Kai continued, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "I watched my family lose everything. I vowed that day that I would rebuild what Harrison Thorn destroyed, and that one day I would be in a position to hold him and his legacy accountable. I have spent the last 15 years building Carter Enterprises to be bigger, stronger, and more innovative than anything the Thorns could ever imagine." He looked at Clara, his dark eyes filled with a fire she now understood. "Marcus's betrayal of you is not just a personal matter, Clara. It is a symptom of the Thorn family's rot. It's the same arrogance, the same cruelty, the same belief that they are above consequences. His mistake was that in his haste to discard you, he exposed himself, forging your signature hiding assets. These are crimes, and I will provide you with every resource necessary to see that justice is served, not just for you, but for my father as well." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a long-awaited reckoning. Clara was not a damsel in distress. She was the unwitting catalyst for a war between two dynasties. That night, Evelyn Reed delivered the first official salvo. A process server flanked by 2 imposing security guards walked into an exclusive Beverly Hills restaurant where Marcus and Isabella were celebrating their new life. In front of a room full of the city's elite, he served Marcus Thorn with a lawsuit that was breathtaking in its scope. It alleged fraud, forgery, illegal asset transfer, and infliction of emotional distress. It also filed an immediate injunction to freeze all of Marcus's known assets, personal and corporate, pending the investigation. The news report Chloe sent Clara later that night showed a photo of Marcus, his face pale with shock and fury, the legal documents clutched in his hand. Isabella stood beside him, her beautiful face a mask of disbelief and horror. The caption read, "Thorn heir sued by pregnant wife in explosive fraud case. In the quiet of the penthouse high above the city, Clara placed a hand on her stomach. The baby kicked a strong, reassuring movement. A small, determined smile touched her lips. The battle had just begun. The lawsuit landed like a bomb in the serene, manicured world of the Los Angeles elite. The story was irresistible, the cheating heir, the glamorous mistress, and the pregnant wife fighting back from the shadows with the backing of a mysterious, powerful benefactor. The narrative Marcus's PR team had so carefully crafted of the unstable, demanding wife was instantly obliterated, replaced by a far more compelling tale of betrayal and resilience. Marcus Thorne was not accustomed to being on the defensive. He and his family were used to controlling the story, to silencing problems with money and threats. But this was different. The asset freeze was a devastating blow, a logistical and public relations nightmare. Suddenly, his access to the endless well of Thorne family money was choked to a trickle. The credit cards he used to fund his lavish lifestyle with Isabella were declined. The planned renovations on their new house ground to a halt. Isabella Vance, whose attraction to Marcus was inextricably linked to his power and wealth, began to show the strain. The smug satisfaction was replaced by a nervous, shrewish energy. The romantic dinners were replaced by hissed arguments in the lobbies of hotels they could no longer afford. But the Thorne empire was old and formidable. And at its heart was a queen who would stop at nothing to protect her son and their legacy, Eleanor Thorne. Eleanor was a woman carved from ice with a smile that never reached her cold blue eyes. She saw Clara not as a wronged daughter-in-law, but as an existential threat, a commoner armed with a billionaire's weapon. She decided to handle the matter herself. One afternoon, as Clara was returning to the Carter Tower from a doctor's appointment, she was intercepted in the private garage. Eleanor Thorne stood waiting for her by the elevator, flanked by a severe-looking man who was clearly her personal security. Clara Eleanor said, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Eleanor," Clara replied, her heart pounding. She clutched her purse, her knuckles white. "My lawyer, Evelyn Reed, handles all communication." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Eleanor scoffed, stepping forward to block her path. "Lawyers are for business. This is family. I came here to appeal to your better nature." "My better nature?" Clara asked, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Where was Marcus's better nature when he forged my name and threw me out on the street?" Eleanor's smile tightened. "Marcus is a passionate man. He made a mistake. But you are blowing this far out of proportion. You have been given a generous settlement. What you are doing now, this vulgar public spectacle, is an embarrassment. You are embarrassing the father of your child. He embarrassed himself when he chose to commit fraud." Clara countered, amazed at her own steadiness. The safety of the penthouse and the strength of her legal team had forged a new spine of steel within her. Eleanor's facade of civility began to crack. "Let's be clear, you little gold digger. You married my son for his money, and now you're trying to extort him with the help of his biggest rival. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? Kai Carter is using you. He's a predator, and he will discard you the moment you are no longer useful in his pathetic war against my family. Kai has shown me more kindness and respect in 2 weeks than Marcus did in 5 years, Clara retorted. Kindness, Eleanor sneered. He has you locked up in this glass tower like a pet. You think this is freedom? You are a pawn in his game. A very foolish one. She took another step closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Drop this lawsuit. Take the money we are offering. We can make it a bit more for your trouble and disappear. Have your baby somewhere quiet. If you do not, I will personally see to it that you are destroyed. We will paint you as an unfit mother. We will prove you had an affair with Carter. We will drag your name through so much mud you'll never be clean again. We will fight for custody of that child, and I promise you a thorn will be raised by a thorn. You will not see a penny, and you will not see your son. The threat, so vile and direct, struck a primal fear in Clara's heart. The thought of losing her son was unbearable. For a moment she wavered. Just then the private elevator doors hissed open. Kai Carter stepped out. He had been in the security office watching the entire exchange on a monitor. He moved to stand beside Clara, his presence a solid, unshakable wall. He was taller than Eleanor's bodyguard, and his quiet intensity seemed to suck the air out of the garage. He looked down at Eleanor, his expression one of pure glacial contempt. "Eleanor," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "I heard your threats, as did the high-definition audio and video recorders in this garage. My legal team will be adding witness intimidation and coercion to the list of charges against your family." Eleanor Thorne, for the first time in her life, looked genuinely shocked. She paled. Furthermore, Kai continued taking a step forward as she instinctively took a step back. "If you or anyone associated with you ever comes within 500 feet of Ms. Ellis or her child again, I will unleash the full financial and legal power of my enterprise against yours. I will not just win a lawsuit. I will dismantle your legacy piece by piece. Your threat against her child has made this personal for me. Now get out of my building." His voice, though quiet, had the force of a command that could not be disobeyed. Eleanor, flustered and defeated, turned on her heel and practically fled to her waiting car. Upstairs in the penthouse, Clara was shaking, the adrenaline and fear finally catching up to her. Kai poured her a glass of water, his hand steady. "She meant it," Clara whispered. "She'll try to take my baby." "She will try," Kai corrected her gently. "But she will fail. The courts do not look kindly on adulterous fathers who commit fraud and whose families threaten pregnant women. Her threat was an act of desperation, Clara. It means we have them cornered." He was right, but Eleanor's attack opened up a new, uglier front in the war. True to her word, the Thorne PR machine went into overdrive. Tabloid articles appeared filled with anonymous sources who claimed Clara was mentally unstable. Photos of her and Kai, carefully edited to look more intimate than they were leaked. The narrative was clear. She was a scorned wife who had immediately jumped into the arms of a richer, more powerful man to exact revenge. The public pressure was immense. Every time she left the building for an appointment, she was hounded by paparazzi. The stress began to take a physical toll. Her blood pressure was elevated, and Dr. Hansen warned her that she needed to avoid stress at all costs for the health of the baby. The penthouse, once a sanctuary, started to feel like a cage again. Kai, seeing the toll it was taking on her, became a more constant, grounding presence. He would insist they eat dinner together, not to talk about the case, but about art, about books, about her dreams for her son. He would tell her stories about his own struggles, about building his company from the ground up. He was opening up to her, showing her the man behind the CEO persona. He discovered her love for painting a passion she'd abandoned when she married Marcus. One afternoon, she entered the penthouse's spare room to find it transformed into a fully equipped art studio with an easel, canvases, and every kind of paint she could imagine. "Evelyn says you need an outlet for the stress," he said, simply standing in the doorway. "My father's debt is repaid, Clara. My war with the thorns is my own. But helping you, that has become something different. It's not about revenge anymore. It's about seeing you and your son safe and happy." That evening, for the first time in years, Clara picked up a paintbrush. As she swept colors across the blank canvas, she wasn't painting away the pain. She was painting through it, finding a strength and a voice she thought she had lost forever. She was no longer just a pawn or a plaintiff. She was a creator, a mother, a survivor. And as the Thorns' empire raged outside her window, inside her fortress, she was finally starting to build her own. The legal battle stretched into the fall, a grueling war of attrition, fought through depositions, motions, and discovery requests. The Thorn family's legal team, a pack of high-priced corporate sharks, did everything they could to delay and obstruct. They filed motion after motion to have the asset freeze lifted, to dismiss the fraud charges, to discredit Clara as a witness. Evelyn Reed, calm and methodical, batted them away one by one. The turning point came during Marcus's deposition. The meeting was held in a sterile conference room in Evelyn Reed's downtown office. Clara was present on Kai's insistence. "You need to see this," he'd said. "You need to see him without his power." Marcus walked in, flanked by his lawyers. He looked thinner, his handsome face etched with strain. The swagger was gone, replaced by a brittle arrogance. He refused to look at Clara. Isabella Vance was nowhere in sight. The tabloids reported she had decamped to Europe, her loyalty fading as quickly as Marcus's bank accounts. Evelyn began calmly asking about his relationship with Clara, his business dealings, the sale of the house. Marcus answered with rehearsed, dismissive replies, sticking to the story that Clara had agreed to the sale and was now suffering from a case of seller's remorse, manipulated by Kai Carter. Then Evelyn changed tactics. "Mr. Thorn." "I'm placing before you Exhibit A," she said, sliding a document across the polished table. "This is the final sales agreement for your Bel Air property. Please turn to the last page." Marcus did so, his expression smug. "Yes, that's the document." "And that is your signature?" Evelyn asked. "It is. And underneath it, the signature of Clara Ellis. Did you see her sign this document?" "Yes, of course." Marcus lied, his voice firm. "She signed it in our home office on the evening of June 10th. That's a very specific memory," Evelyn noted. "What were you doing that evening?" "We were discussing our future, the need to downsize for a more family-focused life. It was all very amicable." Clara felt a surge of hot anger. She had been at a prenatal class that evening, a fact she had documented in her calendar, and Chloe could corroborate. Evelyn smiled, a tight, dangerous smile. "Thank you, Mr. Thorn. Now I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Albert Finch." She gestured to a man sitting quietly in the corner, whom Clara hadn't noticed before. "Dr. Finch is one of the country's leading forensic handwriting analysts. He has had access to dozens of samples of my client's signature from before this period, checks, letters, legal documents. Dr. Finch. Can you share your conclusion regarding the signature on Exhibit A?" Dr. Finch adjusted his glasses. "The signature of Clara Ellis on the sales document is a forgery. A competent one, but a forgery nonetheless. There are microscopic tells in the pressure and slant that are inconsistent with every known authentic sample. It was created by someone attempting to imitate her handwriting. Marcus's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection. This is conjecture. It will be admissible testimony in a court of law, counsel, Evelyn said calmly. And perjury in a deposition is a serious offence, Mr. Thorne. Marcus's face had gone ashen. The confidence evaporated, replaced by naked panic. But that Evelyn continued leaning forward like a hawk, spotting its prey, is not your biggest problem. She slid another file across the table. It was thicker. This is not about just one house, is it, Marcus? This is about a pattern. Let's talk about the Thorne Legacy Corp's Phoenix Project. At the mention of the name, not only Marcus, but his entire legal team stiffened. It was clearly an internal confidential code name. The Phoenix Project. Evelyn elaborated, her voice cutting through the silence, is a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. For the last 3 years, you and your father have been systematically siphoning funds from Thorne Legacy Corp. into this entity under the guise of research and development. You've been devaluing the public company to prepare for a hostile takeover by yourselves. You plan to buy it back for pennies on the dollar, taking it private and cheating your shareholders out of billions. Marcus looked as if he'd been physically struck. Where did you... That's a lie. It's corporate espionage. It's not espionage when it's discovered through legal means. Kai Carter's voice cut in. He had been silent until now, a thundercloud in the corner of the room. He stood up and walked to the table. Your mistake, Marcus Kai, said, his voice low and lethal, was getting sloppy. When you forged Clara's signature, you created a criminal case. That gave us subpoena power that a simple civil divorce case would not. We were able to look into everything. And when we started pulling on the thread of the money you stole from your marital assets to hide in your personal offshore accounts, we found they were linked to a much, much larger web of accounts. Your Phoenix Project accounts. He laid a final document on the table. It was a wire transfer confirmation. And this is the real masterpiece. To cover your tracks, you moved money from the Phoenix Project accounts to buy out a tech patent from a smaller firm, a patent you needed to make the takeover work. But the bank that handled the transfer is a bank that Carter Enterprises happens to have a controlling interest in. Every transaction was flagged. We have it all. The transfers, the shell corporations, the falsified board minutes signed by you and your father. It's over. The room was utterly silent. Marcus Thorne stared at the papers, his face a mask of utter devastation. He wasn't just going to lose a divorce settlement. He was facing federal charges, mail fraud, wire fraud, securities fraud. Years, potentially decades in prison. He had not only destroyed his own life, but had brought down the entire house of Thorne his father had built on a stolen legacy. He finally looked at Clara. For the first time, she saw not a monster but a pathetic broken man, a boy who had been given everything and had destroyed it all through greed and arrogance. There was no triumph in her heart, only a profound, weary sadness. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply slumped in his chair, his head in his hands as his lawyers began a frantic whispered conference. The king had been checkmated. The empire had fallen. 2 weeks later, Clara gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy. She named him David after her father. She was in a private suite at the city's best hospital, a suite Kai had arranged. He was the first person she called after Chloe. He came to the hospital not with the air of a victorious CEO, but with a quiet reverence. He looked at the baby asleep in Clara's arms, and a genuine, unguarded smile touched his face. "He looks like you," Kai said, softly. "He has your strength." The news of the Thorne scandal had exploded. Harrison Thorne was forced to step down as CEO amidst an SEC investigation. The company's stock plummeted. Marcus, in exchange for testifying against his own father, was negotiating a plea deal. The Thorne legacy, once a towering monument to power, was now a smoking ruin. Clara's settlement was swift and massive. She didn't take it from Marcus. There was nothing left to take. Evelyn Reed, on Kai's instruction, had structured a deal that made Clara a primary creditor in the corporate bankruptcy proceedings. Her settlement came from the liquidated assets of the corrupt empire that had tried to crush her. It wasn't alimony. It was justice. She was now an independently wealthy woman, her future and her son's future secured not by a man but by her own resilience. Holding her son, looking out the hospital window at the city skyline, Clara felt a profound sense of peace. The storm was over. The war was won. And from the wreckage, something new, something entirely her own, was just beginning to grow. Clara Ellis's journey took her from the heights of Bel Air to the depths of betrayal and back again, not to the life she lost, but to one she built herself. She walked through fire and emerged not burned but forged into a woman of incredible strength, a devoted mother, a talented artist, and the master of her own destiny. Marcus Thorne's greed and cruelty were the catalysts for his own downfall, a reminder that empires built on lies eventually crumble to dust. And Kai Carter, who started on a path of cold revenge, found an unexpected redemption in an act of kindness, healing old wounds by helping to create a new future. What did you think of Clara's incredible story of survival and justice? Do you believe the Thornes got what they deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by her story of resilience and empowerment, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for watching.